From the ashes of empire, a new hope beyond man. The Trinity, Mirai, Thran, and human now bound as sisters, the first interspecies alliance embarks on a journey to build a better future. Old ghosts and new threats loom. Cold darkness and cruel light threaten to engulf the fringes of the frontier. From the ashes of empire, a new hope beyond man.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a slightly belated Baltic Star After. It's always my fault, I'm sorry. A Baltic Star After Hours. Thank you for joining us. You may have tuned in expecting to see your usual band of three bearded gentlemen, and instead you've got one bearded gentleman and an oik. And I can only apologise for this. Ewan has been struggling a bit with this. He gets up very early on a Friday, and it's caught up with him, I guess, and he wants to ensure that he can give as much and enjoy as much of his Friday evening. So he's taken what I think we agree is a very sort of wise decision, I think, and sort of stepped out for this evening. So it's just the two of us, a head-to-head, is it a tete-a-tete?
A tete-a-tete.
A tete-a-tete. A tete-a-tete.
So tonight you get to watch us play chess in silence.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got the boards laid out, which are just off screen. So hopefully, just by the way our eyes move and our expressions, you can tell who's winning. So, as always, I'm Luke, without beard now, which is good. Just getting used to my plate face. Everyone's a plate or a horse, and life has given me plate. With me is my more hirsute is beard.
Wearing a badger.
Wearing a badger, but it's going very badger-like tonight. I'm loving it. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for still being here if you haven't just clicked away and discussed. If you don't already, look at following us on @BoysBaltic on Twitter. I started a Discord today because I had to share some stuff that someone wanted to send me. So, yeah, so we're on Discord. I'll sort that out. I don't know if anyone uses that. It's probably big, for all I know. I'll find out. And I don't know. Yes, this is Boys from Baltic Star, which is a traveller tabletop roleplay game adventure. We live play on Fridays, and we will do tomorrow from 10 till 12. On our Twitch, you can catch up on the last episode where we exeunt pursued by a shark. A large shark. We nearly didn't exeunt, that's the problem. There was nearly.
It was a damn close run thing.
there was nearly the only exeunt we nearly did was down its big devouring mouth hole, which Ben was rolling hot. He was looking forward to it. But
I wish a couple of those rolls had gone differently.
Dare you? But our Thursday night we just sit around and chat for a bit. I think I've got a wine open, but I'm guessing you've got a wine open, Ben, or at least something.
Oh yes, definitely.
Fantastic. And we just sit and chat.
I have a South African Shiraz.
Oh, hark at you! I've gone the opposite end, and I've gone for a Malbec. A hearty. I've been off them for a while, but it was on offer, so that's a good reason to buy wine, I find. So, what are we talking about tonight, Ben?
Well, with our copious amount of planning, we carefully constructed a sort of thing that we were planning to talk about last week, and then didn't. And then it was actually 2 weeks ago, and then last week didn't happen, and 2 weeks ago we had a plan, and then that plan fell apart as soon as we started talking. So now we finally got to the point where the plan only fell apart about 3 minutes ago.
And I'd say it fell apart through our own decision, at least.
Yes. Yeah. So we may get onto that plan later. If not, it will come around in a later episode.
It's lurking like a sinister beaver, just waiting.
Because we have a limited number of ideas, and this one is one that's one of them.
Exactly.
But we were going to talk actually this evening, or our revised plan is to talk about science fiction itself, about the concept of the genre. So where did you first get into science fiction? I mean, was it movies? Was it books? TV? What?
Oh, grief. I remember. So I was born in 1980. For those, I know I don't look it, especially now, but I was. And I remember being at my nan and granddad's over Christmas when, through that sort of era, the early 80s, through to sort of about 87, I think they played at least one of the Star Wars films on like Boxing Day. It was like Star Wars, Zulu, Mary Poppins, I think pretty much like every Christmas. And so I remember my earliest memory would have probably been Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
And then damn Ewoks running around everywhere. and the speeder, which was, that scene is probably my first, actually. I hadn't even thought about this till we were talking. My first sci-fi scene of memory is probably the speeder scene through the wood.
Yeah.
And then the big sarlacc mouth. Probably my two first sci-fi scenes.
There you go.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah.
And I've got more, which I can go into in a minute, but what are your earliest memories of sci-fi?
A little bit like you, but I am a little bit older than you, like about a decade older than you.
What's 10 years between friends?
So, as a consequence, my first science fiction movie was the original Star Wars, and it wasn't by any means my first film. I'd been to see a number of films before that, and back in those days, cinemas worked a little bit differently because you generally had what was the remnant of what used to be the sort of long set of entertainment, where they gave you like a 3-hour slot and you had a newsreel and a cartoon and all those kind of things bundled in. Well, by the time I went, the B movie had become a sort of 25-minute or 15-minute National Geographic documentary, which in my memory was always about bears fishing for salmon in the Yukon. I'm sure there must have been more documentaries than that, but that's the only one that in my brain I can now think of.
There's a lot of bears and there's a lot of salmon. They could have done a different documentary about each bear.
Well, they could have done, but in my recollection, it was always the same bear and the same fish.
This sounds like a recurring nightmare. We need to get to a psychotherapist about this.
Yeah. And part of the reason was that most of the movies weren't sort of big tentpole releases. There wasn't much of a sense of a blockbuster. You sort of went to the cinema and then whatever was on was what you watched. The sort of concept of going to see a film and finding which cinema it was on was completely alien to me back then. You went to the cinema, and whatever the films were, you selected from whatever was on offer. Often one, because the multiplex hadn't really taken off in a big way yet. And accordingly, the first film I can actually remember going to and deliberately going to see that film was Star Wars. And somewhere between the text crawl at the beginning and the Star Destroyer coming overhead is literally the moment I fell in love with cinema. Because I had no idea you could do that. The entire room felt like it was shaking. And I looked up at the ceiling thinking, there's a Star Destroyer up there. I was... so that probably is my introduction to science fiction. So it's very similar to yours, though a few years earlier.
Yeah, a couple of films before.
A couple of films earlier.
I think there's certain big film releases that go down in history, I think, and Star Wars growing up was always said that was the big deal. Queues around the block, people literally seeing, like you said, seeing they'd never seen it before. There'd been some sort of space opera films beforehand that to sort of, which some things in Star Wars were quite similar to, but nothing captured the imagination. And then of course the toy line, everything, the marketing. It was just the perfect storm, I guess.
Star Wars was the first film I can ever remember where at school you didn't ask whether or not another kid had seen it. You asked them how many times they'd seen it. Because everybody had seen it. The question was whether you'd seen it twice or 4 times or 6 times, Yeah, it was a bit of an event. And at the time, I think it basically broke all the box office records, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it sounds about right to me. But I guess at the time there were fewer films. Even as a kid, I remember you go to the cinema and there wasn't that much choice of film. And this would have been the late 80s into the early 90s. Before, like, in the mid-90s, like 96, 97, when there's a big boom on British film, it got a lot bigger, I felt, after that. But before that, you had your choice of 2 films. Like, I'd go to Sittingbourne or somewhere like that, because it had 2 screens. And that was kind of, you're like, okay, it's this or this. Okay, I'll see that. I'll see that one then. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, by the time I was a teenager, I got very heavily into a different part of the genre area, which was horror films. A love which has yet to desert me. But you never quite forget your first love, do you? And Star Wars was a bit special. And then not long after that, I started reading science fiction novels. Beginning, if I remember, with Isaac Asimov, but it broadened quite rapidly. So did you get into reading science fiction as well?
I'm trying to think back. As a kid, I did a lot of reading. I remember sort of from the age of 7 onwards, sort of going to bed with a book and falling asleep with a book. My parents could say goodnight and leave me, and I'd sort of read myself to sleep. The first science fiction I remember reading is a bit wonky. It was the Red Dwarf books.
As in Doug Naylor?
Yeah. There were 4 Red Dwarf novels. I don't know if there still are, which I've got. There was the first one, which the book was released in the late 80s, I think. I got it when I was like 12 or 13. Then there's Better Than Life, which started with the Better Than Life, the virtual reality thing.
Okay. Yep, which was an episode, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And but that was the start of one book, and the Rimmer, of course, ruins everyone else's fantasies, so they come out back onto the ship. And then about 10 years later, the 2 of them had split up from writing Red Dwarf, and they each wrote a separate book. So it was a bit weird because they sort of ran almost like parallel worlds. They sort of started from the same point but did totally different things. So it's Last Human. I think that's where he finds Earth. But then I can't remember what the other one was called. Someone that's watching might know it. But it was the first book that got me. Because I'd watched a bit of Red Dwarf because it was sort of... It was after 9 o'clock, and at that point I was still 8 or 9, so it's just the scope of it. I think what hit me was the scale, and that's something for me. We've joked about if I've got megalophobia, I fear of big things, but it also creates in me an awe about space, I think.
Yeah. And
so when he first in the book they talk about he's on it might be Titan maybe, where he starts Lister, and he gets on the ship because his idea is to get back to Earth. He's got to do 2-year run out to Uranus and back, I think, and then he can go back to Earth. Miranda, I think he was on, and he gets on the shuttle, and it comes around the edge, and he says, and his screen was filled with red, and red, and red, and I was like, in space, the ship's like 6 miles long, and space allows you, and it allowed me that scale. Every planet they went to, for example, was different things. They could encounter just so many different species, things that don't exist in real life. Sci-fi says it can happen, and that was the sci-fi book that got me hooked, actually. So
right, yeah, yes. I'm genuinely trying to remember now which was the first Asimov I read, and I don't know. I suspect it might have been one of the robots anthologies, but I'm not certain at all. But I ended up reading a lot of his, a lot of Heinlein, and but quite the sort of the classic golden age science fiction writers, I suppose. And then later on, I got into sort of working rather backwards. I got into the Jules Verne stuff and the H.G. Wells and that kind of thing later, and then eventually got hooked on science fiction by Conan Doyle and Edgar Allan Poe, you know. But yes, it took me a long time to get into the more modern science fiction stuff. I was still working my way through the back catalogue while everyone was talking about cyberpunk and things like that.
Still catching up, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was. I'm trying to think back to my reading, and I don't think my reading went big on sci-fi when I was younger. I think that was something that did come about later. So you were talking about catching up with cyberpunk. Right, reading-wise, that's only something it's been a genre I've loved for a long time, but it's only just recently that I've been reading into cyberpunk more, even though it's been a genre I've loved through board games, video games, you know, film, movie for a long time. And then I think the first thing that had a slight touch of it, although it wouldn't be classed as cyberpunk, was Peter F. Hamilton. Do you know of?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's got a series of books. I can't remember which one it is, but the one I read was just a two-parter. Big old books, of course. The second one was Judas Unchained, and it's about, there were certain aspects in it that I think are quite cyberpunky. Some are like hard sci-fi. It mixes this very hard sci-fi with almost like a detective novel, with some opera with cyberpunk. So this one starts where they find this big Dyson sphere around basically a sun suddenly vanishes. Yeah, a star suddenly vanished. So why has this star vanished? And they send out a big ship, light years and light years, to go and find it out. And it's because it's been encased in a big Dyson sphere thing by another being. Because inside it is some creatures that have gone wrong, basically. You don't want to deal with them. So there's that's like Pandora's box, where they open it up and then, you know, and then the rest of the book is sort of dealing with that. But he has concepts which were then looked at in things like Altered Carbon recently and things like that. So, and there are a couple of sci-fi concepts that I've loved over the years, and one is the regeneration, so getting younger again.
Yes.
So people can be regened, and then everyone has basically, like people that have watched Altered Carbon, they basically have a stack installed in the back of their heads, which has all your personality and details, and that's if you get killed, the stack can be the stack can be put into some, you know, regrown into someone else, with the theory that your memories live on. So people are living for hundreds of years, which again is a cyberpunk thing with the super rich. You know, people have to buy insurance to have a decent body or get a decent youngening and stuff. So yeah, it's those concepts in sci-fi, I think.
I do completely get your love of the sort of scope of it, the sheer scale of the universe. And if you're going into science fiction, of course, it doesn't just have to be this universe. You can add as many universes as you need. It's all your playpen. And I do fully acknowledge that a good story can be told happening inside a living room. But it can also be told on this grand scale, and there are some remarkably sized universes to wander around, where you do see just the most amazing breadth of stuff. Science fiction, I think, is easy to read if you've got a good imagination as a reader. I think it's quite hard to write, actually, because you've got to put in so much of. You don't necessarily have to put it in the text, but you've got to know an enormous amount about how your particular universe works in order to then make the story make sense.
It's that depth of lore. Like people that that are writing up roleplay games is always about the lore. What the food is, what the people are, what this and that, and you're like, yeah, well, we'll be doing that for many planets potentially, and you're doing what they always say you shouldn't do in the fantasy setting is allowing flight. By the very nature of sci-fi, there's flight generally, or there's machinery, or there's some. Even if it's in Victorian sci-fi, there's something fantastical. Whether it's something that's scientific, something. So
actually, that's a fair point. I mean, steampunk wasn't a thing when I was a kid. At least I don't think it was, and has grown enormously in recent years, hasn't it?
Really popular. Even Faversham. Hop Festival. There's a lot of steampunk hats going around. I notice these days.
Yeah,
everyone out in their corsets and their top hats and their goggles.
Yeah,
and fair play to them. I say it's not my personal thing, but I really appreciate the aesthetic in that regard. If that makes sense.
I suppose it's just the same thing as kind of when you see a Republic serial of Flash Gordon from the 30s, and you see what people in the 1930s thought the future would look like. And of course, you discover that a lot of it's fantastical, but a lot of it looks a lot like the 1930s. The levers and the screens and the controls and things like that look a bit 1930s. And when you get up to Alien, in fact, I think it was a deliberate decision by Ridley Scott not to try and imagine what future graphics displays would look like for computers. He just said, no, screw it, it's our aesthetic. So for whatever reason, they've got CRT displays and computers that go as they display live.
See, now I was going to hold off on Alien, but now you've dragged me into it.
Okay, Alien.
That aesthetical choice was perfect. I'm sure you would agree.
Absolutely.
And creates an atmosphere and a setting that for me is unparalleled. For me, the first Alien film is one of my favourite films.
Yes, same here.
And I think it's the perfect bonding of science fiction and horror. So no wonder you like it, because I think it's an excellent science fiction film. It ticks a lot of science fiction boxes, and it's an excellent horror film that, as well as ticking lots of horror boxes, probably added some horror boxes along the way as well, I would imagine, here and there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not necessarily in terms of the plot, but certainly in terms of the broadening of the scope of it. Yes. It's ultimately a haunted house movie, isn't it?
Oh yeah, with a slasher chasing them.
Yeah, there's a monster chasing you around a creepy old castle. Basically, it could be a Universal film from 1932 where it's the Wolfman chasing you around a castle.
Yeah,
it could easily be that. But I think the thing that Ridley Scott does really well is the pacing and the cinematography.
Oh, massively.
In fact, I would argue that he's a pretty competent director.
It's been said.
But he is a truly world-class cinematographer. The look and the style he puts into his films are just epic.
Well, as an aside, I really rate Kingdom of Heaven, the director's cut anyway. I think which was panned generally, but the cinematography in that is a beautiful thing. And once you see the full thing, I think it stands up. I don't like the shortened version. I think it cut too much, but I think it proves your point that for setting a scene and just creating that very lifeblood of the film, he's marvelous.
Yes, and I think it's an exceptional choice. And again, of course, we have Star Wars to thank for that film.
Do we?
Yes. Apparently, in '77, he was standing in New York on one of his business trips back and forth, I don't know, and he saw people just queuing round and round the block to get into Star Wars. And he picked up the nearest payphone and called his agent in London and said, "Find me a science fiction."
I want to direct a science fiction. Then that was 79, was it? Alien? That feels right, yeah.
So just 2 years later, out comes Alien. And it is, as you say, it's an exceptional science fiction film. It's a very, very solid horror film. And it is a piece of visual craft that is just off the charts.
And I think I love that it takes within a very short time, you learn something of the world it exists in, of the corporation, of what they do on this massive, massive ship, crawling across massive space to a massive planet. So you understand something of the world they inhabit through their chat, and that I love that first hour where they're chatting and this, that you learn so much. So you learn the vastness. Then you go onto the planet and you start to learn the vastness of what they're up against and the universe. And then, given all that vastness, it shrinks down. Like you say, it could be in a castle, and it's like looking at a massive painting and pointing at a small bit and say, right, we're focusing on that today.
Yes,
and it's great.
Yeah, I think that first hour is quite interesting because for me, one of the tricks it uses as a story is when you first see the spaceship plowing through space and the computers coming online and all of that sort of thing, you think, I have no idea what's going on here. And then you introduce the characters, and it turns out they are basically the crew of a transport ship. And they might as well be moving a cargo ship back and forth across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
They are exactly those kind of characters. They're like truckers. And because of that, you immediately understand who all of them are and what they're doing, because they are so very recognizable as the human characters we know around us all the time.
You've got like the oily rag guys in the engineers that are immediately there. And you've got the ones that immediately look cleaner, that are like the flight crew. You know, the captain who stands out slightly. It's everyone plays their part so well in that. You're right.
And there is a distinct class difference on the ship between the sort of officers and the crew.
Yeah.
And it's obvious the way they refer to each other, the way they look at each other, the way they speak. It immediately becomes, there are officers and men on this ship, so to speak. And yes, it's a very, very impressive film. It really does set you there very quickly. Also, I'm always in favour of films that have cats in.
Not me. I wish it died. I joke. I watched them through. I was at someone's house over Christmas. We used to have family get-togethers with them, and they all sat in the living room and watched The Grinch or something. And I'd just bought for Boxing Day. We'd gone out shopping, and I bought all 4 Alien films on DVD.
The box set?
Yeah. I bought them separately. They weren't a box set at that point, sadly.
Oh, okay.
But I think Resurrection had just come out and they'd sort of done a little set with all 4 looking the same kind of thing, same cover. So I bought them all and I just asked if I could sit at their computer and just sat in the other corner of the other room and just watch like all Alien films over that next day while they were watching Christmas films. So that was quite a nice little moment. Of course, and I think the first one's my favourite, but I understand why people like the second more. It's a taste thing, but I totally understand it. It's an excellent film.
Yes.
But I think the third one is better than it's sometimes given credit for. And I think if Fincher had been given the original story arc about it being like in a monastery and this and that, the original stuff sounded amazing.
Right, yep.
But I thought there's stuff about the third that I quite like. They sort of tried to bring it back down, just the one alien, no weapons, make it a bit gritty. It's a bit dangerous again because it's the prisoners. I thought even the fourth, I think, is going for it. Like, Jeune's a great director. And he got given a lot of junk to deal with, but I thought he got it to play some kind of tune.
I think Jim Cameron made the right call for the second one.
Yeah.
He didn't decide to remake Alien. He decided to say, okay, I'll take that universe and I'll make a completely different kind of movie. We're not going to have a claustrophobic little horror film. We're going to have an action adventure roller coaster ride with Marines storming the beach,
which I think could be done because they pointed at a little tiny point of a big picture. They could point at another tiny point in that universe. So
absolutely, and I think that made it a completely different film. It made it completely his own, and I think it's a very solid effort.
Yeah, definitely.
Depending on my mood, there are times where I'm more in the mood for that one than I am for the original.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you. On balance, the original is the better film. The third one did very little for me because I just feel it's a really, really inferior and tricksy attempt to actually make the first one.
The first one again, yeah.
But the fourth one, though it is very weak in places, also has some genuinely fun moments. They don't really string together into a coherent film, but some of the moments are good.
Yeah. Exactly. I think the concept of them trying to clone and that concept I thought was quite an interesting thing because it became like the spoiler alert for a film that's like 20 years old 25 years old. It felt like there was a natural progression. The first, they've discovered something terrifying. The second film, it's been discovered, knowledge is out there, they're going out to deal with it, check it out, deal with it. Third, I think you're right, because it's sort of a bit of a rehash of the first. It sort of only gets away with that because it's an outpost. They've not heard of this thing before.
Yeah.
But then the fourth, set years later, is right, we've got this, now we're going to try and weaponize it and use it for our good, and we're going to take this out. It's sort of almost human nature.
Yeah.
You know.
And I did like it when they swim.
That's a mixed report, the swimming. Swooshing through. Oh.
Swimming alien. I thought that was excellent. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, as a series, they're all watchable. I mean, none of them are so awful that you deliberately skip them altogether. You'd either say, I'm just going to watch my favourite, or you'd go, you know what, I can sit through all of them. There's enough there to keep me going. But the first one is a cut above.
No, yeah.
But then that's also true of Star Wars and quite a lot of things. The first one is the best.
It's the best.
Everything else is variations on a theme of not quite as good.
It's just trying to recatch that fire, isn't it? That's to make a bit more money or to a bit more.
I mean, realistically, given how rare it is for a film to be that good, the odds of the second one or third one in the same series hitting that perfect moment again are very slim. And it's not going to happen often.
And I think the reason why Aliens gets close is because, like you say, they don't try and remake the first one. They just say, this is the franchise, we're just going to tell a totally different story.
Yes, I think that's the strength. It's not just a different narrative. It's a completely different tone and theme and everything. And it was clever that they managed to get Ripley back into it and still make her character coherent and a proper continuation from the first one. Because obviously, was the character name Burke, wasn't it? Carter Burke. Does have to talk a little bit fast in order to get her back out there for understandable reasons.
Well, in the second one, she becomes what do they call it when a character becomes the audience's proxy? Isn't it the proxy? She's seen it. She knows what it is. We know what it is. She knows what it's capable of. She says as much. So you sort of cling to her. You didn't know she was going to be the survivor for the first one. That was such a great thing because she wasn't the star. The guy that played the captain was the big guy, wasn't it?
Yeah. Dallas was definitely the guy you assumed would be the hero.
So when he gets got in the tunnel, in the fence, and that, it's a shock. But I don't realise that. I didn't realise that looking back because I'm looking at it through 1990s eyes, where Sigourney Weaver's a very well known and well respected actor. You know, so But at that time, but then by aliens, she can become the proxy because she's definitely started like she survived, so she immediately bumps to the top.
Mm.
But even then, she sort of swims a little bit in and out of the plot. They give the team a chance to be them, and she's almost like I said, as the proxy, sort of being a little word in the ear. This is not a great idea. This is not great. This is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we get Hicks, don't we? Who's the most relaxed and easygoing of the Marines, who turns out to be our heroic Marine chap. But we also get Newt, who's a little bit of the proxy for the audience as well, because she also, once they actually find her in that little passageway, it turns out, of course, she also knows much more about how to survive on this planet than the Marines do.
Exactly. Well, she's had to, bless her.
Mm. Yes. Yeah.
If people are looking at, I know we might be small if people are looking at phones, but I'm looking over there because, as Ben will know, that's where my DVD and Blu-ray collection is. And so I'm getting inspiration. And I was thinking, I want to talk more about TV in a bit, again, because I think there's good TV stuff. But while we're on films, can you think of like maybe 4 or 5 sci-fi films that really stand out? They don't need to be the best sci-fi films, but you know what I mean, that really are important to you or stand out to you or mean something to you, or you think shape your I guess your view of sci-fi and why you always try and kill us with sharks and big animals.
Sure. Yeah. So I suppose The Thing from Another World is the first one. That one I loved as a kid, and I still love it, and I still rewatch it periodically and think this is just such a riot. It's the one with the killer carrot, and it is magnificent. And Blade Runner was a fairly seminal one for me because I was a teenager when it came out. I think, even though it's not actually that great a film, I think Pitch Dark was a remarkable exercise in sort of an alien civilization and an alien world that you could go there and just find, well, it's exactly like us, except for the fact that, you know, the beasts come out at night.
Oh, Pitch Black. Sorry.
Sorry, Pitch Black.
Yeah. Oh, we were talking about that the other week, weren't we? Because I'm a big fan of how it looks and how it plays. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah. Good call on that. At least I don't have to say it in my list. It's got Claudia Black in it as well.
That's true.
That's always a plus point.
Yes, and the Australian woman from Rogue.
Oh, the one that plays the military character, whatever she is.
Yeah. Yeah, she was very good in Rogue, but I can't remember her name off the top of my head. And yeah, I mean, other than that, it is mostly, I think, the ones we've already talked about. It is Alien and Star Wars. For the most part, I don't think they're ones that have spun off from TV shows or anything like that. Though, obviously, I did fall in love with Doctor Who as a kid. I fell in love with Hitchhiker's Guide when I was a youngster.
What did you think of the Hitchhiker's film from? It's probably about 10 years ago now. It feels sooner, but it probably was 10 years ago.
I didn't hate it as much as some people did, but I suppose I thought it was wildly inferior to the ancient BBC TV series, which is the mark, the barrier that you've got to clear in order to be good.
It's the seminal piece for it, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't as good as that. But it wasn't terrible. Yeah. So, what are yours? What are your sort of your science fiction movies that define the whole thing for you?
I'm looking over, and there's a lot to choose from, I must admit, in amongst the weird foreign films I've got up there. I would say, in no particular order, Starship Troopers, which
Okay.
which by many measures is not a good film, but in other measures is a really good film, and I think it's a really interesting piece on authoritarianism for a start.
And propaganda.
And propaganda. That's the whole. It's all about you can't vote unless you've served in the military. The propaganda is about kids do your bit. Hey, it's a kid in a military uniform. Hey, join the army. We're going to fight until it's done. It's all that. Even the uniforms for the secret service part of it, like Dougie Howser was wearing, is all like very SS.
Yes.
And the split of the three people, the three friends going off and having very different experiences. I think and I watched it during lockdown, and the effects are still very good for like a 23-year-old film, I think. Like shockingly good.
Did you like the sequel?
I've got it and I've still not watched it, much to my chagrin. Apparently it's a much smaller scale, right?
I think the sequel is superb.
Now I've got to watch it over the weekend.
Everybody hates it, except me. I am the one person who likes it.
Casper Van Dien definitely hates it. He's not in it, is he?
Oh, I don't think any of the original cast have been bothered.
No. I just heard it was done on a lot smaller budget, so I bought it and I've never just got around to watching it.
It is, in fact, exactly the opposite way round to Alien and Aliens. You're making a sequel set in the same universe, and instead of trying to do another massive, big military roller coaster ride, you do a little closed-off haunted house one.
I like it. That's a nice way of doing it.
Same concept, but backwards.
Especially for a film that probably knows it's going direct to video. It's a good, I think there was a third as well, but I don't know too much about that. What other sci-fi? Then I've got two which I love, which I think are more exercises on internal ponderings, I guess. Which are Moon.
Yes.
Which is just I love good music in a film. And I love, like I said, because of the scale, I love a shot of a lonely person on a science fiction setting. Just that to me, and the way it unfolds and you learn more as you go on, beautiful. And I really love Sunshine, but I know some people don't like the final third.
I enjoyed Sunshine. I enjoyed it all the way to the end. It's never going to be... I suppose it's a bit slow-paced for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoyed it all the way through. Yeah.
I love the bit where, again, spoiler for 13-year-old movie, I guess. It's got a great cast for a start. It's got Hiroyuki Sanada, who's brilliant. It's got Cillian Murphy, who's brilliant. Michelle Yeoh, who's brilliant. Chris Evans, who's brilliant. It's got it's got a few others as well. Benedict Wong. Annoyed because I can't remember the other actress who's great, the younger actress in it, which I'm really embarrassed I can't remember her name. But the casting is amazing. It's what's his name directs it. 28 Days Later, Slumdog Millionaire, Trainspotting, Boyle.
Yeah,
Boyle directs it. It's written by Alex Garland, who did The Beach and other things that I thought were very well written. The music is stunning, and it's got Underworld doing some of the music in as well.
Okay.
And I love how slow it is, and I love that this Mission of Hope, the point where it becomes a one-way mission, and they accept it. Again, the scale of the sun. When things are going well, when things are going badly. Sanada, playing Kaneda, his death scene is hit. I watched it at the cinema. So last minute, our friends came around and said, "Hey, do you want to watch a film tonight?" Yeah. We'll go watch Sunshine. And in a big screen, seeing that guy fry, it's like with the noise, it's just like wow. And I think, and to the very end, the bit, and what struck me was the bit where they fall at the end where the ship becomes just a cube,
Yep.
and it falls through the layers of the sun. The sound is so haunting, and that's just like, yeah, love that film.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think I had one more on my mind, but it's gone now.
Actually, I've got one more as well, which I've forgotten about.
Hit me with yours while I'm thinking about mine.
Monsters.
Monsters? What's that one?
Have you not seen Monsters?
I've not seen. Now I feel like I've got 2 films I need to watch this weekend.
It's directed by Gareth Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
And it may actually be his very first film, I think, or close to it. These aliens have invaded Earth, and there are like quarantine zones all over the place where they've been, where humans have essentially built big walls to sort of isolate the areas where the aliens have taken over.
Yeah.
And this young guy is sent to find a young woman in South America in one of the risky areas where the aliens are, and deliver her to safety through the giant border wall that separates the United States from Mexico.
Okay.
And it is a pretty good story. It's a pretty good sort of narrative. It's got a lot of sort of politics and theory behind it, and the completely inevitable and utterly blindingly obvious twist at the end, nonetheless, still has an enormous amount of power when you see it.
Oh, fantastic! All right, that's it. That's on my list now. I must be able to find it
that's
somewhere.
well worth a look.
I might go on the website and buy it. I like to own a copy of something, so I'm sure I can pick out for a few quid somewhere. So I think it's well worth it.
Yeah.
What are my last 2? I had it. Ex Machina.
Okay.
Which I absolutely love. Went to the cinema for that, and that's probably one of my favourite films of the last decade.
Yeah, very clever film as well.
Because you get sucked into it. I got sucked into it. And I knew I was getting sucked into it, and I knew I was getting played. But it tells you, it switches you so much between who is right and who is wrong, and who to trust and who to not trust, that you totally buy into it. And of course that's the ending. Of course that was always going to be the way.
Yes.
But you're an idiot. Because you've done exactly what the film, and that's another Alex Garland film, actually.
Yes, it is, and there is a little bit of the sort of Steinbeck in it, isn't there? The toxicity of hope.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. There's still the slightest bit of hope at the end, which
yeah, the way hope is actually a poison if it's believed in too deeply.
Exactly. Don't believe in the hope. And the other one was, oh no, I had it in my eyes. It was something slightly different, and that's why it wasn't Attack the Block, although I thought Attack the Block was great. It was...
Yes, I liked that. I loved the aliens in that. I thought they were very, very nicely done.
So black,
Yes,
it's that blackest black colour. They've been painted with that blackest black colour. All you could see was the teeth, wasn't it?
Yes, that was Jodie Whittaker, wasn't it?
Yeah, and what's his name? From John
Boyega.
John Boyega, yeah. And it was Joe Cornish from Adam and Joe directed it.
Yes, that was really clever. I enjoyed that.
I liked it because it turned the bad boys into the heroes. The sort of the.
Yeah, but I mean, not cloyingly. They weren't actually heroes. They were just survivors, which I guess is what they were always.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were always just trying to get by and have food on the table. Really.
Yeah. They were just trying to make it through another day, like a lot of people in the world.
It's just in case of police and dealers, it was rather terrifying aliens.
Yeah, and they were good. The when you see them all climbing up the outside of the building, and you think, "Oh crap, that's a lot of them."
There's no way, because all they've got is like a baseball bat and a knife, and that's about it. And Gattaca, of course.
Gattaca, okay, that wouldn't be on my list.
I think I watched that when I was at university, and it stuck with me. Actually, it's another class thing. It's all my class stuff's coming out to play politics. Okay, I thought it was beautiful. I thought it had a number of scenes that are very memorable.
Yes.
The swimming scene, the fire scene, rocket taking off, the being scanned, and I thought performances were decent. I think it's become popular to like Gattaca though, so I think I'd have a lot of people agreeing with me. It's been looked back on as a strong piece, I think.
Yes, I tend to find that. At the time, I think people were a bit unimpressed, but over time, I'm hearing more and more people tell me that they like it a great deal. I'm just not one of those people.
Well, I watched it at a similar time to one of Cronenberg's lesser films, Existence, and they, at the time they were kind of seen at pretty much a similar kind of it's Existence, it's Gattaca.
But I don't know. I love Existence.
I like the way it was Inception before Inception,
and I love the ending. That last sort of few seconds of it is unbelievable.
Oh yeah, very good, very good. Definitely. It's been years. I've got it, but I've not watched that for decades. I need to just get through all my shows. I need to watch one after another. I need to stop playing video games and stop actually playing roleplay games. Just sit in a darkened room and watch. And stop having children. Lousy kids taking all my time.
Yes, it's not the having of kids that takes a long time. It's the raising of them.
Raising of them, exactly. I need to get them to watch. Too many of my films are too old for them. When they a few more years, and Lena can start watching films with me, I think, and then the films that I love, and I think.
Yeah, probably don't start with Alien.
No, we'll leave that on a little while, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you can start there are plenty of family-friendly science fiction films out there. In actual fact, Star Wars is maybe she's not quite there yet, but Star Wars is achievable for her.
I think Star Wars is achievable. I watched it. I watched Return of the Jedi. Not much older than her, probably a similar age, to be honest. 8 or 9. Yeah, I think so. It's definitely doable.
Yes. So you can start to introduce her to some of the movies you love.
Yeah, it's just being picky about how old she is when I introduce her to those movies. Really, I guess I want to be responsible.
Yes, but you also don't want to wait too long, because if you're introduced to these things when you're sort of 37, you think, I don't get it. Why are there no chainsaws?
Exactly. Yeah, you need to catch them young. You need to give the science fiction bug young, and then I think it's a very hard bug to shake.
Yes.
Like segueing over to the TV, like going back to
when
we're talking about early sci-fi. I remember, so again, I'd be a generation after you, and I remember Sunday, I'd go to church, and I'd go to church then, and then after church, luckily I'd missed the Waltons and Little House on the Prairie on Channel 4. But then I might get back in time for Land of the Giants or Lost in Space or something like that. Oh my
God, those repeats were wonderful. I love those.
They always found a way to be stood on a matchbox with a giant matchstick. I don't know why. Every episode it seemed to be on I think they had the same props, but climbing up a table leg.
Land of the Giants, was that Deanna Lund, who was the one, the woman with long hair and the amazing legs?
I was 8. I wasn't looking for amazing legs.
I don't know. I just seem to remember this remarkably beautiful actress in it. But yes, they were always, literally running down a drainage pipe, or, as you say, jumping over a matchbox. Or
if it was the gimmick, that was the gimmick they were using.
Yeah, and it is worth pointing out, of course, that the Land of the Giants turned out to be exactly like ours. I mean, almost down to brands of cigarettes and things like that.
They just ended up on.
Yeah.
And what I want to know, Lost in Space, is why did the boy always get sent with the creepy old man? They always split up into the same pairs.
Yeah, that was a bit weird. But Lost in Space, it had its moments.
But Lost in Space, that's how you have to refer to it.
I felt it was all a bit samey.
Yeah.
The one you haven't mentioned from that group, though, is the Time Tunnel.
Oh, the last episode sits with me. I think that had a really heavy ending.
Yeah, I agree with you. And actually, I think it was effectively the predecessor to things like Quantum Leap, wasn't it? And Sliders.
Sliders,
Remember that?
yeah. The first couple of series were really good for Sliders. I thought I enjoyed Sliders.
Yeah,
and loved
yes.
Quantum Leap as well. To be honest.
Yeah, they were. I think they were of their time. If you watch them now, you'd think they were a bit weak in the technical department, but the concept behind them was good.
They were perfectly made for before TV series started to produce stories that ran over seasons, and I'm going to get into DS9 later. Battlestar Galactica, especially, not Battlestar Galactica, so Babylon 5.
Babylon 5.
Stories that span series, and you need to watch the whole thing. Before that, it was always about you could pick up Series 2, Episode 13, or Series 3, Episode 12, and you know exactly who's who, what's going on, and you step in. And I think that's why Sliders or Time Tunnel or Quantum Leap worked. You knew Sam, you knew Ziggy, you knew the overarching storyline, but you could miss 4 episodes.
Oh yeah.
Like you can watch, they're perfect for repeat. You could put any old episode on, and you'd be like, "Yeah, fine, I love it, brilliant."
Yes, they were little self-contained things. I know, obviously, there was a theoretical narrative. You learnt a little bit more about Sam each episode, kind of thing.
Yeah.
The reality is, it wasn't important. It didn't really matter for the plot, did it?
No, of course not. Just a bit of flavour, a bit of flavour.
Yeah. Yes. And I do quite like that kind of thing, the Star Trek sort of idea where basically it's a reset at the end of every episode. So it's a Planet of the Week episode. You just go to the planet, find out what's there. Kirk sleeps with everyone. There's a fist fight, which for some reason he fights by clasping his hands together like this.
Oh, the axe handle. Poof, the axe handle. Yes.
Yeah.
His shirt gets ripped a little.
Yes. And for some reason, whenever he's being hurt or whatever, he becomes extremely constipated. You know what I mean? The way he did Pain was sort of
all clenches in. For me, I think the first TV that I watched, that I made a point to watch regularly, was so I finished school, watch my children's BBC or whatever, a bit of CITV when I was allowed to watch Nightmare. Then then Newsround, Blue Peter, Neighbours. Then at 6 o'clock, if Crystal Maze was on, it'd be Crystal Maze on Channel 4, or on BBC 2, it'd be Next Generation.
Right.
From the first series onwards, I remember watching it. There were some terrible episodes. Like I've been rewatching Next Gen and DS9. The first series, maybe 2 series of Next Generation, is ropey. My goodness. But
yeah, though wasn't the very first episode quite good though?
Yeah, Encounter at Farpoint was good. And then it went back to it almost became a slightly newer version of the original in almost effects and the way they filmed things and sort of it stands out. I know it was like 88 at the start, but it didn't feel 88. It felt a decade earlier. But they picked it up.
I don't know. I remember catching the occasional episode while I was at university, so you're about right in terms of years.
But then by the time it hit Series 4, Series 5 and so on, you were getting some classics. Or even, I think it was at the end of Series 2 or 3 that Picard gets captured by the Borg and there's the big cliffhanger. That was quite a thing. But they were still doing 2 parts or 3 parts, and then they never really referred to that episode again.
Right.
But that was my first long-running sci-fi that I watched. Next Generation. Loved it.
The first science fiction on television I really got hooked on was Doctor Who.
Who was your doctor? Everyone has a doctor.
The first Doctor I can remember actually watching, on a regular episodic basis was Tom Baker. He's not actually my favourite Doctor, but he was my first.
Mine was McCoy with Ace. Loved Ace. So she still does all the Comic-Cons apparently, and she's lovely.
Right,
she's
okay.
really friendly and lovely as well. So
yeah,
there you go, so Gildred. Who's your favourite then?
Matt Smith, no contest.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Absolutely no contest.
Mine's Capaldi.
Up until Matt Smith, it would have probably been Patrick Troughton.
Oh, wow! So it really was no contest all the way through from Troughton up to Matt Smith.
Yeah. I mean, Tom Baker was a close run second to Patrick Troughton for me, but when Matt Smith came along, that was it. Job done.
That was you won over. He's got a few. He was the Doctor when I think I was in Japan, so I was not seeing so much. I guess I wasn't getting to watch so much, and so I've only watched his back.
Right.
Is he the one with the silence?
Yes.
They were good episodes, very good episodes. Yep. Did he do? Was he the one with the Minotaur thing in the Maze of Rooms?
Yes, I think he was.
That was excellent.
I'm trying to remember now.
And then the one with the doll's house in the kids' wardrobe, which was terrifying and excellent.
Yeah. And I think he was the. Yes, I mean, basically his run starts with the episode where he sort of crash lands in a garden with the girl who waited.
She's probably one of my favourite Doctor Who companions.
Yeah, same here. I mean, nice comic timing and quirky enough for him.
Yeah, I think so.
But yes, the idea that if the TARDIS has crashed on its side, then the swimming pool would be in the library, I quite like. I think that's an amusing concept. And I kind of fell in love with him. It must be 10 minutes into that episode where he's sort of walking through the town and he's pointing out things and sort of asking random questions about everything he sees. And he points to the pond and he says, "What's that?" And she says, "It's the duck pond." And he looks and there are no ducks on it. He says, "How can you tell?"
You're like, "Oh, yeah, he's the guy for me." So I love Capaldi because I think his choice was brave because... And there were a lot of people very upset that they'd gone from Matt Smith to an old guy because Who was gathering because of Matt Smith and because of thingy before him. It's too late in the day. David Tennant. It gathered quite a young crowd, and the girls that I knew were quite into Matt Smith, and so then it was old Capaldi, and I loved him because from the thick of it. Sadly, we never got big, sweary, angry, political. Doctor Who, which would have been brilliant. But
no, that's true.
But I think I didn't like what's her name from the first couple of series so much because I think they almost made her a bit of a Deus Ex Machina. To be honest, she was a bit. But Bill Potts, I thought was brilliant for his third series. I really like Bill Potts for a series, and I thought it was really sad that what became of her until the very end. There's some release at least, but I think some of his episodes are some of my favourites. The one where he's imprisoned in the moving castle, it's probably my favourite Doctor Who episode of all time. And I think for me it's always, I'm not a big Doctor Who fan for the lore, so I'm not a big Doctor Who fan. It's hard to explain. I'm not a big Doctor Who fan, so the lore and all that I'm not interested in. But I'm a big fan of what Doctor Who can do in its 45 minutes when it builds tension, fear, sinister mood, don't breathe or don't look, or you're stuck in this terrifying maze, or the smiley face turns to a terrifying face, or you don't know what's on the floor, whatever. That for me, or the Sleepy Man, or like the suits that live by themselves because you got to pay for oxygen. For me, that's what I like about Who.
I think when you get a genuinely creepy one, like The Empty Child, for example.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Which really was creepy.
Oh, terrifying. It's kids. It's family TV, not kids TV. It's family TV.
Yeah, and as you say, the first appearance of the Weeping Angels. Was amazing.
Episode.
But it also contains episodes like I don't know if you saw it because it was a Matt Smith one. Maybe you were in Japan, but Vincent and the Doctor.
I've seen the clip of when they take him to the future so he can look at his paintings. I think that's beautiful. That is lovely.
Night. Yeah, that is just a truly lovely thing, and it's a lovely moment and a lovely sort of finale, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And those kind of things, and their ability to relentlessly make the Doctor compassionate and intellectual as the way he approaches things. He tries to solve problems with his mind from a position of compassion. And it's quite unusual. We're used to science fiction where the solution is to get the bigger blaster off the wall and blow a slightly larger hole in it. And it's actually one of the intellectual problems I've always had with things like Superman.
Mm-hmm.
That you look at Superman and Lex Luthor, and one of them is a guy who, for all of his quirks, is a normal human and highly intellectual. And so in order to stop him getting too uppity, an enormous muscle-bound alien comes and just beats 7 shades out of him.
Such a
and it's sort of, I'm not convinced that's really the lesson we should be learning here.
That's a bit that is into like the superhero thing. Don't get me started on whether Batman's a heroic character or not. But it's like you're right. Doctor Who, maybe he has rubbed off on me and you more than I would have thought, because in Traveller, we rarely reach for our guns as the first thing. We try that cerebral approach, that Doctor Who approach.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and fundamentally, though you're not always brilliant at it, you do try to leave every planet at least as nice as you found it.
Yeah, maybe with a different person in charge.
Typically, with a different person in charge.
Usually with a different. If we haven't, we failed.
Yeah. But generally, you're not murder hobo types for the most part.
No, I'd rather not kill too many people. If there's clearly something going on where 5 goons have turned up, then bring it on.
Yeah.
If there's something where killing your person to make our escape within the game, as long as they're not some poor old woman looking after her child or something, then fine. It's cool.
And that is a simple reality of any universe where you are often outside the easy reach of like a central civilized influence.
Yeah.
And you are reliant on quite corrupt and quite incompetent regional local authorities for protection. And inevitably that means gangs and powerful corporates and people who are greedy and have their own interests at heart become too powerful, and sure, there's violence and danger. Plus there are giant sharks.
Well, I'd be disappointed if there wasn't.
Same here. Perhaps you could tell.
Yeah, I like them more when I'm the other side of the fence. To be honest, thinking back to the TV, I'd be remiss. I'd be upset with myself if I didn't mention. While we're talking about our faves, I've been watching DS9 over lockdown, which kind of passed me by the first time.
Easily the best of the Star Trek
for me,
series.
it's the best.
Yeah.
And someone was asking me about it the other day, and I think I might post it on Twitter. My favourite, I think one of the reasons why I like it is that on Star Trek Next Generation, They go to classical music recitals. They practice art and music and read literature as their hobbies. They do Robin Hood and this and that in the holodeck. Sherlock Holmes, and they're all very sort of officers, the best of the best. Whereas on DS9, they go to the bar and drink, they play darts, they go to the holodeck for basically sex. It's quarks, which is like what people would do. Let's face it, it's not gonna all sorts of filthy fantasies. Sport, baseball, which people would do. Cisco goes for baseball.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The holodeck wouldn't just be for sex fantasies. It would also be for, kicking penalties in the World Cup fantasies.
Exactly, and then running to the cheerleaders or something after. But
absolutely,
or like, and then like the O'Brien with his when he goes and starts doing like the bombing raids and dressing up as Vikings and things like that. It's other things like, yeah, let's do it. Let's that I love. I love the dirtiness of it. I love it that it's different races mingling. I love the relationships that build. And so Bashir, who sucks for the first series, really grows. I love Bashir. And him and O'Brien, their bromance is a beautiful thing. I love it when there's episodes where O'Brien's going to top himself, which you wouldn't get in any of the other Star Treks, I don't think.
No.
You've got the episode where him and Keiko, she's having another child, and he's really kind of gutted because he thinks he's going to lose his friendship. She's back. He's got used to her being away, and he's really struggling. And that's a really relational thing about getting used to being out with your mates and the partner being back. And so she's like, no, that's fine. You go, and every now and again you can go. And it's that balance of family and friendship is beautiful. The fact that they tell stories over episodes, whole arcs. Quark and Garak are brilliant, and they're dodgy as. And then you've got Cisco bombing planets and getting people killed, and he's a Starfleet captain.
And he's a captain who actually seems to carry what you might call personal authority, as opposed to merely the authority of the rank.
Yes.
You can actually believe somebody saying, okay, I trust this guy as a leader and a commander in a way that, I understand why you'd follow Picard, because, he's got more pips than you. And also he's knowledgeable and experienced, and he knows what needs to be done. So on the kind of missions they took TNG on, you kind of understand why he'd be the ideal guy to be in charge of them, because they're relatively civilized kind of interactions and that sort of thing. But as soon as you get to a slightly more gritty part of the galaxy, you need someone who's a bit more of a charismatic commander. And Cisco absolutely is. He is a charismatic commander.
And he loves his son. And I remember reading back again, looking at it from the future eyes. I said for a black man to have a strong relationship with his son at that time was on TV was unseen. Really, you didn't, and his son didn't want to be Starfleet. Jake didn't. He wanted to be a writer. Yeah, and the love between those two was a beautiful thing. Having his son on the ship was amazing.
I must confess, at the time I first watched it, it didn't occur to me that it was unusual for them to have that relationship, because it was particularly an American TV show and they were African American characters. But it was, as you say, it was an unusual thing to be seen that way. I also thought his relationship with Dax was tremendous.
Yes.
Their sort of like 30-year friendship or 40-year friendship, during which she'd gone through, an actual body transplant. So he kept referring to her as an old man.
And I've said all these, and my favourite is Kira. Kira starts as there's an episode, and all Star Trek series struggle with series 1. It's like an ongoing sort of comedy joke almost.
Yeah.
But Kira starts as a revolutionary who's killed Cardassians for the sake of people on her planet that have died. She's very gritty.
Yes.
I love her as a character. She grows more than almost anyone. She's like works with the Federation because she has to, and then by the end she's donning the uniform at times. There's that growth. But there's an episode in series 1 where they question a Cardassian, and they're trying to work out. It's the episode called Duet, whether he was the guy that was in charge of a death camp or not, whether it was that guy or not that guy. And it's a bottle episode, so there's very few in them, and it's so good. And she shows her realization of like what is worth killing for, what isn't worth killing for. The ethics and the morals in that 45 minutes is so good.
And it actually does get the closest I think Star Trek ever has to the grubby universe where not everything works all the time.
Yes.
I love the fact that in Star Wars, the Millennium Falcon needs a good kick before it will go into light speed. That even good pieces of engineering need a bit of help because they wear out and they need spare parts and things are constantly breaking down and stuff like that. Because the reality is there are grubby garbage chutes just the other side of that shiny door. Because there have to be. Yeah. Garbage isn't going to get clean in the future just because it's the future. It's garbage. So, of course, the chute where the garbage goes down is going to be filthy and smelly.
Dirty.
It is reality. But in Star Trek, historically, you never see any of that. Everything works instantly and it works flawlessly. And all of the characters seem to be, well, it's tempting to say, like, they're all very much on their meds, shall we say. None of them seem to have any personality flaws of any kind whatsoever. And then you get to DS9, and sure, it's not flaws necessarily, but they seem to have a more human, a more civilized interaction with each other as real people.
They hang out as friends. There's clearly friendship groups within it. Yeah. And there's clearly people that don't get on quite so much, but yeah, they bring it together when they need to, and I think and even characters like Morn, who jokingly doesn't talk the whole way through, but he's always referred to, you can never stop Morn from talking, but you never hear him talk. But he's like a classic barfly. It's like he's in Cheers or something. Yeah. And it's just these little side characters and sort of people that come in. The return characters are excellent.
I'm assuming Morn is named as a pun on Norm in Cheers.
It would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it?
So I don't know.
He fulfills the Norm role. Let's face it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing he's Norm Peterson from Cheers,
or Morn Teeter pun.
Yeah, but the one other thing, which I mean, you have alluded to it in passing, but is it the Doctor and Garak?
Yes.
Who eventually, over time, develop. I mean, it's almost an actual friendship, even though they don't really trust each other at all. Nonetheless, they enjoy each other's company.
They have their weekly lunches or something.
Yeah, and it becomes like something from the Jean le Carré kind of spy thrillers, where the the CIA agent and the KGB agent are constantly battling each other for supremacy, but they sit down and have a cup of tea and a game of chess every week, because it's the civilized thing to do.
Exactly. And Garak, of course, brings out like one of the classic phrases. Saying about everything I said is true, especially the light. Even the light, especially
the light.
especially those. And I think I like it because I also love Farscape. Farscape's probably one of my favourite sci-fi. Probably my favourite sci-fi, actually. Again, it's got Claudia Black, so that it's a +1 to the score automatically. And it's Jim Henson.
I'm detecting a theme here.
I think you should, and that's why Uncharted I like, because it's got Claudia Black and and it's Jim Henson, so it's got the fantastical creatures in it.
That's right. It is Henson, isn't it? I'd forgotten that studio had done the sort of puppets for it. Yeah.
Yeah, Brian Henson was involved in it also. So it's not just like what a Star Trek podcast I listen to talks about, loaf. It's not just a human in some loaf. It's an animatronic creation, and see, it comes up with all sorts of creepy stuff. But Farscape, I liked. Some episodes are 15s or 18 certificates, even if you look in. And again, it's grubby, it's awkward. They're thrown together in the first series. They don't trust each other for the whole first series.
Yeah.
They're stealing off each other, there's double crossing each other, but they've just got a shared need to escape. And of course, they bond together. But the villain, Scorpius, is deep and has a reason for why he is what he is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of leather in that series, a lot of bondage. There's a lot of weird, creepy
Scorpius
stuff.
basically wearing like a leather spider web as a hat?
Yeah, he's pretty much wearing a gimp suit, and he's a very spindly man. But there's a reason for it. It's like because he's a cross between Scarron and what's it called, the human one, where Scarrons love the heat and the Sebaceans hate the heat, but he's like a half breed, so he's stuck in this world of pain that needs this sort of. And it's just I really like it, and there's a lot of Australians because it was filmed a lot in Australia, and it's nice to hear an Australian accent sometimes in a sci-fi because you don't. It's so much as American or British.
I do take your point. I mean, we're used to imagining Australian accents in certain soap operas, and obviously in all prison dramas.
Of course.
But you're right. In a bit of science fiction, that's actually quite a nice thing to hear, and it adds just a little bit of variety to it, doesn't it?
I think so. I mean, like, all the extras are Australian, basically. You got like a couple of the stars are Americans, but all the Ben Browder's an American, I believe, but there's a lot of Australians.
Yeah. Now, about the same time Farscape came out, they had Andromeda on TV as well, didn't they?
Yes, I never took to it. Did you? Did you ever watch much of it?
I actually took to it exactly the same amount as Farscape, in the sense that I treated both of them entirely as episodic, even though they both did have, I think, a more extended arc than that.
Farscape definitely did, as far as the series went on as well. They definitely had an arc going on.
But I certainly treated both of them as I'll watch an episode when I get round to it.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed both of them for what they were. And an hour later, never thought about them ever again. I had no problem with either of them, but they were never going to burrow into my brain. But they were of their time.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And of course, you did actually allude to it earlier, but there are a couple that we haven't mentioned that are actually quite big science fiction series.
Oh.
Well, we haven't really talked about Babylon 5, and we haven't talked about Battlestar Galactica.
That is true. I've never watched the Battlestar Galactica remake, even though people raved about it.
I did, sadly.
Oh.
I loved the mini-series they used to kick it off.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the death of 1,000 cuts. You watched the mini-series, and it was this amazing sort of 3-hour or whatever it was, little piece of science fiction space opera. It was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And then over 5 series or however long it took, they slowly peeled the skin off you one slice at a time. Nothing but pain and misery. And it was a slow degradation and a sacrifice of your humanity to watch it, which was a terrible shame. Babylon 5 was not.
I've just bought the box set with the intent to watch through because I watched odd episodes growing up, and all I've heard was it basically, that's the reason why DS9 got as good as it did, and that there's things that happen in Series 5 that are foretold in Series 1, which I love that idea. So I'm looking forward to watching it. So tell me how good it was.
It was very, very good.
Thank you. I'm looking forward
however, to it. if it were me and I were watching it again, and bear in mind I have the benefit of having watched it all the way through. If I were watching it again now, I would watch just seasons 2, 3, and 4.
Oh, really? I know the captain or the commander changes, doesn't he? Is that just after the first one? Yeah.
Yep, a lot.
I remember Garibaldi
Many
when I was
commander
watching.
changes.
I remember Garibaldi, and I remember the bald guys, and I remember the Napoleon guy, and I remember the guy with like the snake skin, and the guy with just the eye, the robot guy with the eye, and the. So I remember the players, and the woman, and I remember the setting. I'm just looking forward. The thing is, they never did it in HD, so it's going to be ropey to watch, but I'm hoping the story carries me through in.
I must confess, one of the weaknesses of it now is the fact that the special effects, or the CG effects, I should say, looked genuinely impressive when they were brand new, because we didn't really know what we were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
They were all impressive for their time, but as a viewer, we have got fantastically more sophisticated now in spotting and understanding CG and knowing what it can do. So they kind of do look like a video game on the Amiga now.
That's why Farscape still holds up for me, because it was 95% practical effects.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you've either got to, I mean, for a modern review, you've either got to just accept that there are going to be limitations and move on, get on with the narrative, or if you can't, you're never going to really buy into that universe. So if you watch old Doctor Who episodes, you are aware that what you're looking at is a monster made out of pipe cleaners and the end of a toothpaste tube. So accordingly, you just suspend disbelief and go, you know what, it's a monster.
It's a terrifying creature. Well, I love wrestling. I can suspend disbelief. You know, that woman that I was talking to half an hour before, who is lovely, I'm now booing because she's stabbing someone with a fork.
Because she's a heel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah. Generally, faces don't stab people with forks unless they deserve it. Then they can do what they want, I guess. But yeah. But that's sci-fi is the suspension of disbelief and just letting to wrap it all up in a bow. I guess it's that allowing yourself to get washed away in it, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And when I sat down to write science fiction on my own, it turned into political and authoritarian commentary and military strategy and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
When I actually wrote a science fiction novel, because that was what I was comfortable in.
Yeah.
Whereas there are plenty of people who'd be much more comfortable doing other areas and other subject matters.
There you go. And that is why. So there's a lot of reasons why we love sci-fi. And, we could talk about it for another hour at least, but we've already gone an hour and a half, so we should probably give
we
the stream
probably
a rest.
should.
We'll save it for another week. Yeah. Sci-fi influences part 2.
Yeah.
Or...
Yeah. Well, I mean, perhaps we can sort of resume the conversation on a slightly more technical note, and therefore segue smoothly into the thing we've been planning for a month.
The thing that I even got my book down, my central supply catalogue with all my gear. I got you to do all the pictures ready.
Yes, that's right.
There we go.
Yep. Lined it all up.
We don't get.
But I'll tell you what, we'll try for it next time.
That sounds good to me, man. Thank you, everyone who's watched this far. I really appreciate it. I noticed live we've had someone from the stream all the way through, and we did have a few others at times. So really appreciate that. Thank you. We'd chat anyway, like we said before, but having you there just brings joy to my heart. So thank you. And probably Ben's if he knew, but I'm the man with the numbers. So, but as it is, we'll be back tomorrow, Friday evening, with our live play. We've just gone to the hotel, the Earth Park Hotel, for a refresh and an evening meal, I believe, before we go and deal with some suits.
Yeah.
Lousy
tomorrow night,
suits.
episode 10.
Episode 10. All right. Cheers, guys. Have a good night, and we'll see you soon. Farewell.
Good night.
Bye.